But the problem is right now we only have a lot of different set of outdated law which touch upon AI. People just don't understand how big is the risk. How are we going to assess the risk? How are we going to make sure that we have all this internal policy to make sure our staff knows what's going on?
Today's guest doesn't treat AI risk like a legal problem or a technical problem. He treats it as a business survival problem. He's a top IP lawyer, tech founder, and a true AI governance expert. Let's get into it with Lewis Ho.
I think there's a lot of traps in between.
Well, Lewis, great to have you on our chair session, to talk about a very, very important point on AI governance. When I saw some of your posts on LinkedIn and as we connect, a lot of what you are talking about really resonated with me. And there's a lot of issues that I see in the marketplace at the moment as well. But just before we begin, maybe tell the audience a little bit, who are you?
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for having me today. So my name is Lewis Ho. I'm a founder of LexGuard, AI. So, and then I have a little bit different background compared to other lawyers. I start as a qualified lawyer in Hong Kong in 2000. So my specialty is IP. So I help a lot of tech company for protecting the IP and also litigating the IP in the Asia areas. And then gradually I also got a kind of second interest, which is found a company at the time of COVID on a disinfection robot. So I partnered with MPR, Software and Robotics, in a sense, kind of give me a very different perspective as not really a pure theoretical lawyers, but also with hands-on experience as entrepreneur. But combining my capability as entrepreneur and lawyers, then I start to think in the era of AI, I think the governance is really a big gap in terms of catching up, the technology. But then when we really put it on potential commercial context, people just don't understand how big is the risk. So that's why it is something that we should really keep talking and make sure everybody knows the risk.
Yes, 100%. I'm so glad to have you on the show. A real qualified lawyer, was talking about the inherent risks involved, especially I think you and I, when we see, all this hype around adoption, just get the solutions and all that kind of thing. And when I see some of the points you made and the article you wrote, it really stopped me in my track, especially when you are talking about the procurement trap on buying a black box. So in your analysis, you mentioned that SMEs, they are not big companies, right? So there's no steering committee. Normally, just a CEO giving the corporate credit card to the marketing manager to try AI, because of fear of missing out, FOMO. And just like that, the company has an AI strategy, right? So you mentioned that AI arrived through the side door, through an I agree button. I think that really captured me. So I just want to ask you, what is going on?
Yes. I think, honestly speaking, not say small company, big company. I think most of the time, as you said, because people are thinking they are just trying something new. So they feel like, I'm just trying a new apps, right? So that's why they just, let's just get the IT guy, click them the credit card, let's just click the I agree button. There probably will be a lot of small print over there. You just don't read it. Right? You just feel like this is another app. There's good, interesting application. So I think there's a lot of traps in between. First of all, they are using your data, right? Because once you kind of agree, then when you start applying the apps or the AI application, the product, then your company data start get into the ecosystem of the AI vendor, right? Okay, so do you really know what kind of data are in? And the second point is, of course, when you terminate these AI apps, are you going to get back your data? So I think there are two big angles. First is, okay, your data probably being used in the AI ecosystem so that they can train their data. Do you know, or do you really agree that the LM can now use your data for training? Or there's actually option to opt out, but do you actually try that? That's number one. And secondly, when you really terminate, how can you make sure that your data will no longer be in the ecosystem afterwards? What kind of proof you got, what kind of audit that you can do. So there's a lots of, relationship when, basically just like your procurement department. I mean, you try to recruit somebody to do it. I think we see two types of AI vendors right now. Either they are really so aggressive, say, I won't sign anything, you just sign my term or just get it. That's number one. The second is, the AI vendor just say, okay, give me the contract, I just sign wherever you want me to sign. But do you think they're going to observe? You don't know, right? So I think that is now the real world, problems. Yes, people just keep talking about AI adoption, but they really don't know what they have signed up for.
So what is the risk of giving all the data to the LLM models?
Okay, so right now, first is your company confidential proprietary data will be in the public domain. Okay, that's number one, because you never know whether those data, first of all, if it is in the pool of this LLM, okay, so it's going to be possibly being accessible by your competitors. Right? Possible. I'm not saying it must. There must be some skill set, whatever, but surely once this information is out, then it's out. Okay. So that's number one. And secondly, internally, how are you going to guide your colleagues? Let's say you have a head of HR, and then they use the software to actually screen candidates. Right, all these candidates give you the resume, or say it's hundreds of resume. How can I read it? I'll say just put it on the apps and just say, okay, give me the top 10 so that I could. Then that all this information will just throw out, right? And you don't know because probably your head of HR won't tell you like, oh yeah, I'm not doing my job. I just get the AI to do it for me. So that's the second one. Do you actually have an internal AI policy to make sure, in particular, if they do it on the company computers, right? So it's very scary, right? And third is, surely when you try to really have a AI procurement, let's say, oh, your procurement come and say, hey, we need to actually do it. So, but then later on, say, okay, this app is no longer usable, right? Then, let's terminate it. But can you actually get rid of them? Because now all your data is there. Your colleagues is there. You're part of become their ecosystem, which of course technically they want you to be, right? So, but if when you terminate, then you want to say, okay, get me back my own set of data and make sure that it's not possible, right? But do you know? So I'm just saying that this is a boardroom discussion. This is a C-level discussion. The CEO, do you know? The CMO, is your background. All this data would just go without your consent.
So do you think most CEOs know what you're talking about?
Well, from my experience now, when I just talk to people, I do a lot of presentation to the board, people will just, oh, Lewis, you don't know.
They never thought about this, right?
Yeah.
In this angle. Okay.
Exactly. And the thing about it, everybody now, in some way, they're doing the same. AI adoption, that's why all the board, all the CEO, they push the CMO, they push the CEO, say, hey, I need to adopt this, I need to do this. But everybody is doing the same, right? Everybody's using OpenAI, everybody's in Gemini. How are you going to differentiate from your competitors? Because everybody is doing the same. Everybody will ask the same set of questions, the same set of prompt to the Gemini, and basically you can't differentiate, right? And then later on, your colleagues, right now everybody talk about AI adoption is trying to cut the workforce. Oh, then I don't need to get 10 people of marketing or corporate strategy because AI can do it for me. Sure, for a moment. But think about it, when you later on, you don't have your own team. You're just on your own, and then you feel like you got the best answer from AI. But think about it, all company CEO got the same set of answer or similar. Then how are you going to differentiate? There's no way because you don't have the team which kind of know all the basic logics of how things been done. This is a more long-term sustainable problem because your company will become one of the many because everybody got the same answer from the same source, which is the LLM. And then a lot of people really don't even think about it. So let's say for a law firm example, now it's really hard for us to hire a big team of trainees because unlike before, we don't need that big army of associates helping us to do the job because we got AI, right? Helping us to do due diligence, do contract drafting, on the IPO process. But think about it. If we don't have the team of people coming up, and when we, at our age, we're going to retire soon, then nobody will have to know how to tell whether the AI is doing it correctly or not, because people would just blindly just say, oh yeah, that's the answer I got from AI, so it should be correct. How can you tell they're not doing their job? So this is a bigger problem for most company. While maybe first of all, when you adopt AI, your profit will go up, your costs go down, you don't have the team that you need. But then later on, your company will dry up because everybody doing the same. You can't compete with the others, and then you don't have the next generation to help you take you to the next level. Then your company will just vanish. So this is the problem I see for the longer term. Maybe late short term you got big gain, but later on you can't sustain. That is the bigger problem.
It sounds like most company hasn't really thought through. And the point you talked about, the junior staff losing, that early career training that is happening at the moment. I've seen even some of the recent happenings, in the world. Unemployment among youth are climbing and getting more and more serious. And to say otherwise, I think it's just turning a blind eye. You see some AI leaders maybe talking about it will create new jobs, but the reality is the data shows that the young people are heading towards more unemployment, and a lot of them feel that way as well, which is why you see recently, in universities in America, when a prominent speaker, talk about AI revolution, they got booed, booed from the students. Everyone is very anxious. So that is a totally a super big part of that as well. But I want to come back to the governance part, especially with your experience, in Hong Kong as well as in AI. You spoke about policy from the CEOs or the company that you have seen or spoken to. Do they all have a policy, or they are blindly adopting without one? What is the trend?
I think right now, definitely AI adoption is the kind of buzzword, right? Every CEO being asked by the boss say, hey, how's our AI adoption? What's our AI strategy? Can you actually tell us? The growth is driven by AI, So, right now as a CEO, you can't go without talking about AI. Everybody, right? Then of course the CEO will push on the CFO, say, hey, you need to assign the budget, do it. CTO, CIO, just do it. I don't care, just do it. Show me something so that I can tell the board, tell the investor, tell the whole world, So I think right now we are in that crazy situation. So a lot of people just say, let's just push it through, at the risk. Let's deal with it later. Honestly speaking, the general counsel would say, yeah, there's some risk, but, she cannot compete with, the whole, management team, right? So everybody just so hyper right now. So I think we are at that stage. Then, as you said, somebody now start talking about like, well, okay, think about it. Definitely AI adoption, sure. But how, when, and what scale, right?
So are you saying that most don't have an AI policy?
Well, we are talking about company start thinking about AI adoption, now really adopt AI. Then when you really adopt AI, then okay, how are we going to adopt AI? So I think that is kind of the steps that we are going through. I think most companies still on the first stage of thinking about AI adoption, to the second stage that, let's do some project. Let's do some prototype. Let's really start automate some of our work processes. We are at that stage. I don't think a lot of the company in Hong Kong, in particular the big corp, they have started automate, the work process on a commercial scale. They probably would say, let's use one department to try out. Let's see whether it works. But then you see all the big banks now, they keep telling us like, we're going to lay off thousands of people because AI. Just say that. That how you do it. That probably would be a phase. I'm not saying that all people now really taking off, thousands of people, but that probably will start to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. I think that would be done. But the risk will start from today, because you sign up with the AI vendors today, right? Then what kind of contract you have signed with them? Have you actually read it carefully? Do you know who actually owns the data when it is in the ecosystem of the LM? And then when you actually terminate your relationship with them, how can you make sure that they won't actually use your data, delete it, right? And then how are you going to protect yourself? So I think there's a lot of question mark to which now, and I say, let's just do it now. Sure, but when you sign the contract will go in for years. And when you actually terminate, some of those risks cannot be remediated. So I think that is the bigger problem, which at least at this point of time, company, when they adopt, they need to actually have a break, right? They can't really just say, let's go. I mean, you need to actually have applied the break really early on so that you know there is a check and balance. Like, okay, when we do this, how are we going to assess the risk? How are we going to make sure that we have all this internal policy to make sure our staff knows what's going on? And on the other hand, we also need to make sure that our AI vendors are doing their job according to the contract, according to our requirement. That is the biggest risk right now.
Yeah, you mentioned about companies start adopting, and then maybe they will think about the AI policy later. Now, I think you and I agree that doesn't work, because adopting AI is very different from adopting all other kinds of technology before then. A lot of that time before, you can start adopting small steps, and then start building your way and then get more people in. But AI is very different. And I feel that a lot of companies don't realize that the moment that you dip your feet wet into AI, you need a policy. In fact, sometimes the policy needs to come before, adopting anything, because once you open that door, it's a slippery road and you have no idea, what goes into the system, trying to uncover what goes into the black box and then put in place a policy 4 or 5 months down the line just doesn't work. And that's basically what I see. And I'm not sure if you agree on that, because when, I read some data says that by first quarter of 2026, over 55% of Hong Kong SMEs have already integrated AI tools in their daily workflows. Of course, to some extent, as you mentioned, So even though if it's just a marketing department putting in, putting in information on Google Gemini, the problem is you have no idea what goes in there. And if the policy comes 4 or 5 months later, isn't that like a little bit, no idea. It's a bit too late.
Yes, you don't know what you don't know, right? So, I mean, on the corporate level, I would say now we see the drastic changes. Before, you just don't control how your employee use AI products, right? And they probably use it without your knowledge and consent. One example, as I just mentioned, is let's say you're head of HR. There are hundreds, hundreds of CV flying in. So he or she might just put all this CV on the AI and say, hey, just help me screen 10 person for interview. But then all this, personal information, backgrounds, information would just flow out, right, without your knowledge. And then we're not really on the corporate level, but think about it. I mean, you have data privacy law. I mean, when a head of child do this, without the consent, the company will be liable, right? Because all these people, they send a CV in with the assumption that the company will keep it confidential, which is also the promise of the company. But then your head of child do something without your knowledge. So I think so there is a big gap between when the company operate or adopt AI and the individual level, right? So I think right now, honestly speaking, most of the workforce in Hong Kong would adopt AI. I mean, they probably would ask the question, oh, yeah, let me just check on the, Gemini, let's ask them, right? Oh, let's just let them help me to revise my email so that it sounds more, more official. I mean, but all information will just flow out, right? So I think this is point number one. And then the point number two is when the company really say, oh, let's really procure some AI product. Step first is, oh yeah, maybe one of the IT guy got the corporate card from the CEO or the CMO, say, hey, just do it, and just push the agree button and then use the company, email address to subscribe it. Then technically speaking, the company subscribe that product, right? And then you've been agreed to abide all the terms, which is always small print. Sorry about that. Then the company data would now officially be part of that ecosystem of the LLM without the review by the legal department, I assume, right? And then nobody knows. And then who knows actually who owns the IP or the data. Then when we say, 1 year after, we say, this app is no longer useful. Okay, let's just get rid of it. You just don't pay, but all the data will just gone, right? And then is there a way for you to actually terminate and make sure that they would delete what you give them? No way, right? So two-level personal level, do you
Mm.
really have a policy to make sure that your staff, when they really use AI product or work, how are you going to govern that? And the second is when the company really on its own adopt AI products on the corporate level, then how are you going to make sure when you procure those products, it's really on the term which is comfortable, safe to you?
Yeah. To the point you just mentioned, I was reading somewhere as well that over 78% of workers use their own AI.
Yeah.
Call it shadow AI.
Yes.
They use unapproved tools,
Yes.
and a lot of them do that. So we call it a shadow AI
Yes.
crisis, right?
Yes.
I want to dive a little bit deeper, more on the law side with you now. We've spoken about, the
Sure.
companies, needing to adopt the policy, but then there are always legal risks associated with the company as well as the CEOs, right? So
Yeah.
on the point of shadow AI, now 82% of enterprises now have unknown AI agents running within their IT infrastructure, out of, again, a survey that I saw. And also most recently, the Privacy Commissioner of Personal Data, PCPD, issued a red alert on agentic AI, right? Warning that, some of these tools, have big risk to the organization. Now, from where
Yes.
you sit as a lawyer, as well as from a governance point of view, what are your views on that?
I think right now, first of all, you do need to have a very clear policy to all your employees as to you definitely cannot say no, you can't use AI because everybody's using it and also that's the way to go. But do you really have a clear policy to inform and educate your workforce that how you're going to be responsibly use AI product in your workflow, right? So this is point number one. At least there is need to be a clear policy on how to use it reasonably. And secondly, of course, then you need to actually have an audit, right, as to whether those people are
Right.
they really try to use this in the computer server or the company property, the laptop. I mean, so this is something that the IT or internal environment need to be kind of clear. I mean, definitely people will adopt that, no problem. But are we going to do it on the company level in the terms that is acceptable by the company rather than everybody just kind of put your own POE or let's say your own something on the server and they kind of data without your knowledge, right? So this is probably just like step number one, but most companies simply don't do it.
So what is the legal risk for them? I think that is the main point here. Like they don't do that. There's many reasons why they don't, right? Potentially it's also number one, knowledge. Secondly,
Yeah,
more importantly, also cost, because not many SMEs can afford to hire you, let's just say, and they are left with a tough decision that, they need to adopt AI in some regard,
yeah,
but at the same
yeah,
time, they need to control costs. In fact, using AI
yeah,
was a cost control in the first place.
yes,
So I think the main point is like, if they don't, what is the risk? Like, okay, you mentioned about data and all that kind of thing, but
yeah.
legally, is there anything they need to be worried about?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, I think in terms of the data privacy law, definitely there will be a breach, right? Because
Oh, okay.
I just mentioned, right?
Mm,
The head of HR, when they actually put all the CV on and just let's do the screening by AI, that means you basically give hundreds of, pieces of,
mm.
personal information by those individuals, and they really under the assumption that all this information provided was on a confidential basis, right? So basically
So it's a
you
data
just
privacy
breach.
breach. Okay. A
Exactly, at
privacy
least I
breach.
would say. And then for a lot of the industry, let's say for banking, for all these professional services, you have your own governing
Mm,
body, and they would keep telling you that you need to keep your clients' data on confidential basis, right? Think about you if you're banks, you got tens of hundreds of millions
mhm,
of customer data, credit card information, So when you or your staff adopt AI products without your express knowledge and without a clear policy,
mhm.
surely there would be something leak out, right? I mean, you see now,
Gotcha.
all these big com now also they got saw this, cyber attack, and one of them is basically all this information leakage.
Mm.
So without all this, you probably would got your regulators come and ask you like, how's your AI policy? Why you got all this like this? So Yeah, I think that is big. And then not thinking about like your customers or even like the government regulator can come and, enforce the contract, all this. So let's say, I mean, you just sit in a big problem. You just don't know what you don't know.
Got it. Yeah. And interestingly, the adoption of AI is much faster in Asia compared to the West. In
Yeah.
Hong Kong, as well as in Singapore, has a super high adoption as well.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, overall APAC has a 70% adoption rate. But
Yeah.
governance-wise, we are much lower than the West. There's a lot of
Yes.
what we are talking about. In the EU, already, there are a lot of I think policies in place, on different levels, whether company level or regulator level. Obviously, in the US as well is a big thing. But I see there's a big gap in terms of high adoption rate in APAC and in Hong Kong, but the absence of really the policy or rather even the law, right?
Mm,
Now, the point now I'm trying also to get your thoughts on is you
mm,
mentioned in one of your articles that Hong Kong doesn't have a standalone AI Act,
mm.
right? Compared to other parts of the world or even Singapore. We'll dive into Singapore a bit
Yes.
later, but maybe, what are the implications of not having an AI Act?
So right now, Hong Kong, I mean, it kind of maintain a more free environment, maybe because the regulator is still thinking about it. They want to see how the market react before they really put something on. Understandable. Okay. But the problem is right now we only have a lot of different set of outdated law which touch upon AI. Let's say Copyright Act, right? Copyright Ordinance, the data privacy, and then all these specific rules governing the specific industry. Let's say banks, financial institutions, hospital. So how people are being, data handled. So you don't have one particular, set of regulation you can look upon into, and there is no one particular set of government agency you can actually talk to. So when you really try to assess the risk, you probably need to go to 10 different departments, try to look for different website. Of course, you can ask AI, but how sure that the AI would give you the correct and comprehensive answers, right? I think in that sense, Singapore is a little bit, one step ahead is they really try to push for some specifics. I mean, right now, Hong Kong is okay. You need to, self-discipline. You need to govern yourself. If you've got problem, I will come back to you, right? But without a bar, without a standard, how can you tell, let's say you are board of directors, how can you make sure that your management team put on enough effort to make sure that it won't happen? Something cannot be solved and cured after it happens, right? But what are the bar? What are the standards? Do you really have a best practice? So I think right now we are kind of still in a bit of the loophole. Yeah.
So you mean that in terms of laws in Hong Kong, it's bits and pieces everywhere, lying in all the different departments. So for a company
Yes.
wanting to stay compliant on AI laws, they don't have
Yes.
one place to go to. They need to make
Yeah.
sure that each part, and
Yeah.
also in that sense, is quite confusing. They have nothing to
Yes.
refer to versus Hong Kong
Yeah.
have a
Uh,
standalone AI Act, right? So
yeah.
in that regard, from your lawyer hat point of view, does
Mm.
this put the companies at higher risk because they
Of
don't
course,
have?
of course. But yeah, think about it because all these government agency departments, when they really see the problem, what they would do is they would go back to look at their set of regulation, which they are the enforcement agency, and then they would apply it to your company. But then when you try to defend, say, oh no, that's not really what they. But I mean, every department would just look at what they do at their particular scope, right? Definitely can see now in Hong Kong either you have a totally free, let's say, oh, you just do it. Nobody care, nobody knows, and government agency they might have some overlapping issue. You just don't know which department would be the enforcer. But once the tide shift, say, oh yeah, we need to do something, then suddenly all the department would just go out and say, oh yeah, you are problem, just do it. And then you say, okay, but 3 years ago you just say you didn't say anything. Say, oh sorry, I mean we now need to do it. So but everyone would just look into its own particular scope. So that's why I say it's really important that we need to have a single agency with a single set of law. Then everybody would know what are the standard. You can't tell me like, oh yeah, this industry have a different standard. because of that. Or that's why I only focus on the data privacy. So, this is the point that I'm trying to make is AI governance applies to all industry. You need to help set the bar to a level. Otherwise, people don't know where to follow.
I 100% agree with you on this.
Mm.
I've been looking at this space a lot as well. So in the meantime, without a standalone act, I suppose the onus lies with the internal legal teams, to
Yes.
make sure that they are compliant.
Yeah.
Do you think the company internal legal teams are equipped even to have the knowledge? Because most of them are not even trained, in this mindset of thinking, not to
Yeah.
mention, the absence of an act. How do they perform their due diligence? How do they guide their companies?
Yeah. You need to have a very high level view as to what's happening because, as I said, AI adoption really applies to all department of the company. I think before as a general counsel legal, in house, your business team comes with you with oh yeah, there's a contract, please review, right? But you don't exactly know the business problem, right? So you just review the contract, say, oh yeah, there would be like 10 possible loopholes, so think about it, let me revise or let me get an external assistance. But now because of AI adoption, it basically applied from the sales and marketing to the internal operation, to the finance, to the HR, and then all go back to the board and this management team, right? So it's basically is cover all this. So I just not sure your legal team would have a very fluid understanding of how your company operate and how AI adopt in different departments as in the food chain, right? So without this broad risk assessment, you will not be able to give a very comprehensive advice to the company. So instead of piecemeal reading on one particular contract for one particular client, you need to have an overview as to what's going on for the company. As I said, do you really know your staff? Are they doing what kind of AI product they're using in what context? As I keep saying, I mean, AI adoption means you need to have a specific use case. You know what type of use case is now being automated? What kind of use case has not yet been or been considered? So there should have a team of people within the company which need to know inside out who's going to do what, and you need to guide through the process. So this is something which I think most company is lacking right now.
It sounds to me that we are heading into a tsunami of issues
Yes.
because Hong Kong is predominantly made up of SMEs. 98% of all companies in Hong Kong are SMEs. And as I read, as of late 2025, 360,000 SMEs, right? And even if a fraction of them step on some of those red lines that you were talking about, we're looking at a tsunami of big issues coming.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment to say?
Yes. I mean, think about it as a tsunami is most people were still on the beach. They don't know what's going on, right? But then 5 minutes afterwards, suddenly there's a big wave of 10 meters high, just crash the whole beach and nobody can actually escape. We are really at that stage now is sounds quiet. Nothing happened. Everybody is business as usual, but luckily, oh yeah, we got now AI some products, so we got some little success. But think about it, when the tsunami just come, nobody will survive.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear that, it's just a little bit concerning. But one of the areas that are also pretty interesting to me, recent development is about stable coins, right?
Yes.
Obviously, Hong Kong as a finance hub, finance center, I feel that on the finance institutional side, it moves a little bit quicker. So recently, Hong Kong Monetary Authority granted stablecoin licenses, to HSBC and a few other giants, right? Trying to position Hong Kong like an agentic commerce. But when AI transact natively, who is the legal person when the agent spends money autonomously? This is an area that I don't really know that much about, but I'm really keen to hear what your take is, in terms of when AI agents start spending money or investing money on your behalf?
Thank you, Eric. I mean, this is a very interesting question. I think on one hand, we push very hard on stablecoin. So right now we do have some new licenses coming out. But then when we talk about the automation, because as you know, the one particular big point in crossing the bridge is whether the AI agent can authorize payment for your behalf, right? I mean, there's a lot of talks about open crawl or a lot of these automated, apps or solution, which now actually help you to automate the process by even doing it on your behalf. Of course, if you give them the consent. And I think some people are really bold enough to give them the consent. Let's say, use my credit card. Let's help me to buy an air ticket. But then later on, with the stablecoin coming, then the AI agent, if you really give them the consent, they can actually buy, sell stablecoin on your behalf, right? But those authorization, once given, it's not easy to get back, right? So
So
don't
who's
think about
legal?
it like
Who's responsible
exactly,
if they
yeah,
loses money? I mean, let's not even talk about it. Invest money on your behalf. Let's say it gives you a comment, a
yeah,
comment, and you are following its comment. Let's not even say a
yeah,
financial advice, because these can be very nuances,
yes,
right? What
yeah,
is an advice and what is not an advice?
yeah,
And you invest based on what the AI agent tells you. Who is
yeah.
responsible? It ultimately, I would expect that the bank is, right.
Yes, yes. Because I mean, think about it. There's a lot of high frequency trading, right? Because you're talking about all these, hedge fund, stable coin, and in the stock market, things just go in a kind of split of milliseconds, right? So I'm sure, it won't just go with all human interaction. So that with a lot of AI agency, a lot of whole AI, automated, process within. But when that's done wrong, either human error or polarization, then the bank behind, the financial institution behind, would be the one being sued, right? Because just like autonomous driving,
Mm,
right? Think about it. You don't have a driver, but if the car hits somebody, then who's going to, get sued? It would be the company which manufactured this, right? No point. They say, oh yeah, the driver is just next to, but because it's autonomous driving. So in some way, we are going to that era, but people really don't see it because I think for autonomous car, you really feel the risk. That's why it just goes so slowly. But when you really on the stable coin, on the high frequency trading, people just don't exactly feel that it's the same risk or even higher risk because you put your money on and you let them do it. And then when you say, oh yeah, why the agency didn't say, oh yeah, there's an error in the LM or there's this. But think about it, everybody is probably using the same LM model. So when is the crash of the whole system because probably all the hedge fund, all the financial institution would do the same thing. So that's why the systemic risk now is really being amplified because either there's no risk or suddenly everybody go to the same risk.
mm, right. So we'll probably turn the page a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, Lewis, if a director of a company is watching this and then realize that they have an issue,
Mm.
what do you think is the very first thing they need to do the next morning?
Okay. So I just did a training for the independent executive directors, So I asked the same questions. And the answer I got is no. Okay. So I say, well, then you should ask the company, right? I say, where you should ask the company. So technically speaking, there is an audit committee. There's probably a governance committee you sit in and ask questions. And I am actually advocating that every listed company you should have an AI governance committee, right? The independent director should be driving this. And then you need to ask the management like how our company is doing in terms of AI adoption and governance. I think right now is everybody asking, oh, how our company is doing AI adoption. Sure, that is an important question, but the question hasn't completed. You should ask AI adoption and governance. So that's why there should be a committee which focus on that. And then you can gather, because you're a director, you should be able to access all the information from the company, right? So you can talk to the CFO, you can talk to the CMO, the CTO, CIO, and of course the CEO, say, hey, this team of people, you should sit together and think about the risk from inside out. Don't just have a CFO come to me say, we'll spend millions now on AI, so we are good. No, spend the money. Where you spend the money, how you going to spend the money, why you spend the money. Do you actually consult the CMO, the general counsel, the CTO of adoption? I mean, do they know? I mean, our customer data is now being used outside, so have you really got the consent, right? Have you actually got the latest update from the government? Have you actually consult? Have you talked to your, peers? I mean, do you know what others are doing? So all these valid question, need to be asked on the board level. And I think there should be a special committee on this.
I 100% agree with you because it's just so different. Hopefully someone who is well equipped with the AI knowledge in order to guide the whole organization as well.
Yes.
So we'll switch gears a little bit because the AI Society of Hong Kong, we are also very much about the little guy sitting at home, not just about companies. And, since I have you, someone who's so knowledgeable and a lawyer on the line, my question is, if companies are struggling with all this, what about the normal guy or girl sitting at home? Because we are all using a lot of AI as well, whether it's Claude or putting in ChatGPT, all these issues about hallucination and, building a relationship with AI. I just wanted to get a little bit of your thought about, what the individual, needs to be careful about as well. While I still have you on the line.
Thank you. Yeah, I think first of all, I don't want to sound very pessimistic. So that's why I would still think that company, individual, we all should adopt AI because this is an era which can't go back. So you can't just sit there and say, hey, because of all this risk, let's just not do it. There's no way. This is a time which goes on, and for years or even decades. So that's why you need to adopt for sure. But when you adopt, think about whether there is a contract, whether so more questions should be asked. I think for individual, when you really use it for your really work process, I think you definitely should let your senior, your management knows that actually use it and how you're going to use it, and then seek for guidance as to whether this is something which the company has said, or should we actually have a meeting, just like a department meeting. Let's just talk about it, because right now I would say a lot of people still don't want to let people know that they use AI in some way. They just say, "Oh,
because maybe it makes them
no,
sound slower or weaker. They want to either use the AI work as their own, sound smarter, maybe.
Yeah, exactly." So, but everybody knows, honestly. I mean, oh, your English suddenly so well. I mean, why your email suddenly become very professional? So
exactly.
honestly, people notice, but no one talks. So I would just say, let's be open. Let's just do it in the environment. So once you got this consensus, I think most of the issue would just go away. Because I think when you hire something, you don't have the transparency, then nobody can actually check and balance.
Great, perfect, Lewis. Thank you so much. Before we end, is there anything else that we should be talking about that we didn't cover? Is there anything you would like to share?
No. I mean, honestly, we can talk for hours. I mean, I think this is such a big topic. It's such an imminent, pressing issue right now. So, I think that today we really share some of the most pressing issue. I think once you get started, have AI governance in your mindset, in your strategies, things would go into the right direction. I think that would be the point I really want to stress is just put this on in your thinking process and in your strategy. AI governance is the way to go.
It's having the awareness, right? The point about you making that you don't know what you don't know. So it starts with really having the curiosity to turn that page and find out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Perfect. Lewis, on the chair session, I also always ask each of my interviewee the same question, which is if there is one question you can ask as an AI CEO, a world leader on AI, who would you ask and what would that question be?
I think right now there seems to be a lot of leaders in the AI world still don't know. I mean, I probably won't go to all these AI tech giant. I probably just want to go back to a normal business owner or CEO is how are you doing in terms of AI adoption and governance? That is the question I want. Just get that awareness, as you said, keep the curiosity. Once you have the right set of mindset in, I think you probably eliminate.
Thank you, Lewis. I think that's an hour well spent, and I hope
Thank you.
Anyone listening in would agree as well. For me to get a lawyer and someone who has so much experience in AI, really in the trenches, advising big companies and boards about the risks and legal implications as well as the steps that needed to be taken on AI, I think would be an hour well spent. So thank you very much for your time. Yeah.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me today. I think I'm really enjoyed the discussion, and I hope this would kind of create some ripple across. So let's really do it together.
Guys, if you found the episode useful, please subscribe, and I'll find more speakers like that to talk about all the various issues surrounding AI.